The following is a recording of a live questions and answers session with Chris McCann that took place on Friday, December 14th, 2018.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to eBible Fellowship's Friday night question and answer program. During this time, we're going to open up the room to take your call, and each person is invited to share whatever on your mind by dialing the number that was just mentioned, and we'll be glad to take your phone call, and I'll try to respond as much as possible by turning to the Bible, which is God's holy word. We only have a short time together on Friday nights, so we're going to get started right away by going to the first person on the phone. Welcome to our Friday night question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Yeah, hi, Chris. Christmas season again, season that is for Christ. Of course, all seasons are. I remember you mentioned before that in 2 Chronicles 20, it talks about the end of time, that all people or nations would be kind of divisive and at each other, every man's sword against every man's sword. We read that in Ezekiel 38, so on. With that in mind, could you go to Revelation 9 is one place, and then I'll find the other place. It's about the locust.
Okay, Revelation chapter 9.
It's talking about they will come upon them like the locust. That the believers are ruling with Christ against the non-believers in Revelation 9. That's the way I take it. And then when you go to Isaiah 33, and I'm sorry, here it is. Here it is. Revelation 9, I don't know the verse, but in Isaiah 33, it's verse 6.
Okay. All right, well, let's take a look at Revelation 9's language concerning the locust. And I'm going to mute you. We're getting a lot of feedback. In Revelation chapter 9, it says in verse 3, "And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. It was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. And in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were, as it were, crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men, and they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions, and they had breastplates as it were breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle, and they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months." And in Isaiah 33, let me start reading in verse 2. "O Jehovah, be gracious unto us. We have waited for thee. Be thou their arm every morning, our salvation also in the time of trouble. At the noise of the tumult, the people fled. At the lifting up of thyself, the nations were scattered. And your spoil shall be gathered like the gathering of the caterpillar, as the running to and fro of locusts shall he run upon them. Jehovah is exalted, for he dwelleth on high. He has filled Zion with judgment and righteousness, and wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times, and strength of salvation. The fear of Jehovah is his treasure." And what's your question about this?
Oh, well, I'll just make a statement. An Iraqi fella, he's a Chaldean Catholic, him and I were having a talk, and he was saying that let's say the Muslim people or other people that are not Christians, they don't really know God, and that we have hope in this crazy, miserable world as Christians. And I thought, in this time particularly, or if I'm a true believer, which I believe I am, I'm actually, in a sense, bringing judgment on him when I tell him that Christ is King, but even though he doesn't believe the true gospel, in a spiritual sense with Christ, I'm actually running over him, if you will, in a spiritual sense, as a locust over a non-believer, not just the Muslim, but he himself. That's kind of obvious. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, that's the idea of the locust in chapter 9 of Revelation, that back in verse 3, and there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth. The locusts did not come out of the bottomless pit. They came out of the smoke. And the pit identifies with hell and death, and the smoke identifies with the wrath of God. And so the army of the locusts, which is the army of God's elect, as Christ has come with 10,000s of his saints to judge the world. One way God views the army of the elect is as locusts, because and also the locusts, remember, are said to have tails like scorpions. This identifies with the message of a shut door, that the door to heaven has been shut and there's no more salvation. And so this is a form of torment to the unsaved. It is the judgment of God that the elect people of God are carrying. And so when we share the truth, when we share the things that we've learned from the Bible at this time, it is acting as a locust, or it's acting as the messenger in Revelation 15 and 16. It's the same group of people. And the 7 messengers come out of the temple. No man's able to enter into the temple until they pour out the 7 last plagues. Those 7 messengers are God's elect. And then we read in chapter 16, they poured out the first plague upon some part of the earth, or some language that pictures the earth. And then they poured out the second plague and the third plague. That's what we're involved with. That's what we're actively doing as we share the information from the Bible at this time. We're pouring out the last plagues upon the unsaved. Now, if someone's a Muslim, there's still, from our limited perspective, hope that maybe God saved them before he shut the door. And then, well, you might say, yeah, but he doesn't even recognize Christ. He doesn't have, he's hard. He resists the true teaching of the Bible. Yes, and yet still there is some hope, not much, but a little hope that maybe God saved him and caught him in the net that did not break, and yet has not at this time drawn him. Because in John 21, where we read about the great catch of fish, and they typify the great multitude, they were all caught in the net, and then we're told, but they were not able to be drawn because of the number, that it was a great multitude of fish caught. And that allows us to have some hope for a delay after salvation before the drawing process gets underway. And, I'm going to take whatever hope I can find in the Bible, and this gives hope for anyone who is outside of the churches, a Muslim, a Buddhist, Shintoist, atheist, anyone outside of the church, not anyone within the church, because there was no latter rain there, but outside there was latter rain. And so I would just keep praying, oh Lord, is it possible that this individual may have been caught in your net? That is, he became saved, and yet, for your own purposes, you have not yet begun the drawing process in his life. And, when normally we would think it's a terrible thing that someone was caught up in a false religion, and they were not part of the Christian religion, because the Christian religion is the true religion if it's based on the Bible, because the Bible's the true book of God. And normally, typically in past time, we would feel sorry for Buddhists and Muslims and whatever religion a person was that wasn't a Christian religion. And yet, since it was God's plan to start the judgment process at the church upon professed Christians that numbered about 2 billion, that means that the large numbers of people, also in the hundreds of millions, that were members of these outside religions, these other religions, were in a sense protected, because they're religious people, they have an interest in God, and if they had been brought into the church, well, then they would have suffered the same fate as all these professed Christians that are in the churches today. But because they were outside the church, and let's say in a mosque or in a Buddhist temple, and they're involved in another religion, that mosque and that temple was not under the judgment of God when God began judgment at the house of God, the corporate church. And so that means even though they stayed in the mosque or stayed in the temple when God was sending forth the latter rain, that was still an area that the Bible would consider to be part of the world, and they could have heard and become saved, unlike those within the churches and congregations. So we can keep praying for them and praying for them. Oh Lord, could you have saved this person, and may you draw him in your time. And so that's the hope we have at this point. But thank you for calling and sharing. And by the way, you mentioned 2 Chronicles 20 and the division that's in view there that identifies with Judgment Day. And I would just like to mention that eBible Fellowship has developed a new track, a new Bible track. You can see the track on eBible2.com. It's posted there in an HTML file and in a PDF file, and I think you can print out the PDF. And the track is called "Why is the World So Divided?" And it's a track. Lord willing, we hope to now plan a track trip and to hand this track out in some places. And just think how this might be received, because so many people around the world understand that there is great division taking place. So this actually opens up opportunities. Let's say you go to France at this time. Is France divided? In a big way. What if you go to Italy? Is Italy divided? Yes. What about England? England is experiencing great division. And you can go nation after nation after nation. Italy, Germany, there's all kinds of forces at work because the nations of the world are part of the kingdom of Satan, and Satan's kingdom has fallen through division. And so now we can ask a question, and of course it would be good to ask in Canada, in America, in South America, why is the world so divided? And in this track, we do try to answer that by pointing out that the kingdom of Satan, this world has fallen, and Christ has taken the kingdom. It gets into May 21 a little bit. It gets into the glorious truth that Satan has been defeated and Christ is victorious, and it answers what's going on. It explains to people why it is that every time they listen to the news, that's all they're hearing. So please check it out, eBible2.com, and again, you can read it and print it out there if you want to hand it out. Print out a couple copies, or print out a copy, take it to Staples. Right now, we're not mailing these tracts out as yet. We're not prepared to do that, but again, please check it out. Okay, now let's go to the next person on the phone. Welcome to our Friday night question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
My question is about my girlfriend. I know there's a couple of calls prior to this. It's just, even though you say this stuff is going on, all right, is that God took over the kingdom of Satan, right? God took over the kingdom of Satan. But yet my girlfriend behaves like she belongs to Satan. So I don't understand why God would torment me. I feel sorry for her. I gave her $1,000 so far, and she's taking advantage of me. I don't understand. If you're saying God is taking over this planet, is why am I being like raped in many ways? I'm here, and she's robbing me left and right. I mean, and the police department doesn't understand. I feel sorry for her, and I gave her money. You said, and I don't understand. If God is taking over the kingdom of Satan, why am I being robbed by her? It's like,
well, now hold on. You're calling her your girlfriend. You're saying that she is doing wrong, and we've had discussion about this before. And the Bible is very clear from the beginning of time until the end of time and into all eternity. It's an eternal principle of the Bible that we are not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. That you can find the problem before the flood, and why God gave a sentence of 120 years, and then he destroyed the world because the sons of God were marrying the daughters of men. And then Abraham, when he sends his servant Eliezer to find a bride for his son Isaac after his mother died, the first thing Abraham tells his servant is, do not go and take a wife of the daughters of Canaan for my son. That's the first thing, before he tells him, go to my country and to my kindred and find a wife there. And you see, the principle so strong that Abraham stressed where not to go first before telling him where to go. And of course, in the New Testament, the same law in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14, be not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness, and what communion hath light with darkness? So the law, of course, covered Israel's whole period of time. There's all kinds of scriptures where God indicated a Jew was to marry a Jew, and Israel's time stretched for century after century after century. 2 Corinthians lays down the law for the New Testament period of almost 2,000 years. And again, all the way from the beginning, all the way to the end, this is the law of God. And so if you're getting mixed up with someone who's not qualified to be a wife of a person who thinks they're an elect child of God, and then things are going wrong, well, what do you expect? What do you expect? God is a God who chastens his people. He corrects his people. And if you're doing something blatant, well, I wouldn't be surprised if you lost $1,000. I wouldn't be surprised if a dozen other things go wrong as well. And you know, it doesn't just apply to you. It applies to God's elect people. When we don't do things God's way, he will chasten us. And the chastisement might be financial, could be physical. It could come in 1,000 different ways. So now, as concerning Christ taking the kingdom and Satan, you're very troubled about this. Seems you're very troubled about this. It's not difficult. Christ is ruling the kingdom, but he is not ruling for the benefit of the unsaved. He's ruling to punish. Read Revelation 19, verse 15. He will rule them with a rod of iron. And he will, in that same verse, it's smite the nations. He will tread them, treading the winepress of the wrath of God. It is not for the welfare, for the good of the unsaved that Christ is ruling. And so if things are going bad for the unsaved, that is by design. God is punishing. If things are going bad for the saved, that is by design. God is in all likelihood correcting and chastising. And so either way, God is the one that is in full control and exercising his authority and power. But thank you for calling and sharing. And let's go to our next caller. Welcome to our Friday night question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hi, Chris. In reference to what you just stated there, which is very true, also I would like to add to that Psalm 9:16. Jehovah is known by the judgment which he executed. Now the wicked is going to get wicked, more wicked, and the unsafe cannot understand spiritual truth. So no matter how much you share, or you explain, you direct them to the Bible, they can never understand it. Now, if you compare the coming out of the nation of Israel coming out of Egypt, Jehovah had hardened the heart of Pharaoh. Pharaoh got more wicked and more wicked and more wicked, and at the end, Pharaoh was destroyed. So today, the children of God have to go through this. I'm not saying all of them, maybe all, I don't know. But it is true that a child of God is going to go through hardship, and it is for their own good, because with that hardship, it causes them to look up, to turn to him, and which is what Jehovah has commanded, is to turn to me and live. So it's the psalmist said, before I was afflicted, I went astray. So with the affliction, it's only causing a child of God to turn to God, turn from their wicked ways, and live. So I agree with what you say, and I'm not trying to. I just thought I share my experiences as well and what I'm learning through these.
Well, yes, thank you. You're correct that is a main purpose behind chastisement, is to bring us closer to Christ, to bring us closer to God, as we, if we didn't suffer setbacks, if things were going smoothly, as we were doing wrong, well, we would continue doing wrong. We would not be turning from the sins that are in our life, and so we would not be living to the glory of God in those areas, and so God does correct us. And I'll read from Hebrews chapter 12. In Hebrews 12, where God speaks of correcting his children, and it says in verse 5, "And ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children, my son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. If ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then are ye bastards and not sons." And this also relates to this whole time period of Judgment Day, because we're following the example of Christ, and the language here of scourging every son whom he receiveth. Jesus was scourged when he was brought before the Roman authorities, and in that whole situation of going to the cross, and so that was as a chastisement in one way, and then he was demonstrating how he became the Son of God through the resurrection of the dead, and which occurred actually at the foundation of the world. So the suffering, the scourging of Christ is teaching us that we have to endure these types of things in order to be declared Son of God. And so now, at this point in time, as we're still alive and remaining on the earth to go through the judgment, we are, as it were, chastened by God, scourged as we appear before his judgment seat, and just remaining here in itself is a chastisement, and so we must endure the chastisement all the way through, and then we're received up as Christ was received. We're declared to be sons of God because we've successfully submitted ourselves by God's grace through his Spirit and endured the process of chastisement, and now God receives us as sons, and we follow the pattern of Christ. Of course, there's also the typical understanding of chastisement that is correct, that many of us already know, that when we do wrong, when we commit sin, then God will not allow it to continue. He'll do something as far as correcting us, and that could be grievous. It could be very grievous, but it's always for our good. It's a wonderful scripture in Romans 8. All things work together for good to those that love God, and so even when we're chastened, it is always for our good, our benefit. I said earlier, Christ is ruling not for the benefit of unsaved man. Nothing that is happening will work together for their good because they don't love God. But everything that's happening will work together for the good of the people of God, the true elect people of God. But thank you for calling and sharing. And I would like to thank everyone for joining us tonight and for sharing your questions and comments, and especially for bringing up the Bible verses that you did. But we're going to end our program at this point. Please join us again Sunday afternoon at 1:30, Lord willing, when we'll have another live question and answer program at that time. But for now, I'll say good night, and may the Lord's perfect will be done.
And thank you for joining us for eBible Fellowship's Questions and Answers time with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. You can hear these questions and answers sessions Sunday afternoons following the Sunday studies and certain weeknights following the Monday through Friday studies. We invite you to visit our new website at www.ebiblefellowship.org. Until next time, may the Lord's perfect will be done.